In this video, I'm going to show you 5 different ways to recolor your lettering in Procreate. And for each one, we're starting with the same exact original lettering. We have the word solid, which is just in the solid golden yellow color, and gradient, which has a blend of different colors. And then also this airbrushed dot right here just to show the effect that these methods have on transparency. So I'm going to turn off the background color, and you can see that this dot starts solid in the middle but then becomes transparent around the edges. So all of these 6 examples are going to look the same at the beginning, and they'll look slightly different when we apply these 5 different recolor methods. So the first one is alpha lock, and you can turn on alpha lock either by swiping 2 fingers to the right or tap on the layer and choose alpha lock. And in the layer preview, you'll see a checkered background. So alpha lock basically just locks all of the pixels that are on the layer. So anything that already has color is locked. So if I just take a normal brush and try to go over it, I can only color on the areas where there's already a pixel. But to make it quicker, instead of having to color everything, you can go to the layer and choose fill layer. So what do you notice? Everything changed to this blue color, same exact color that we were going for, but the gradient turned solid. So everything on the gradient layer turned to this solid blue color. If you zoom in on this airbrush dot, you can see that everything in here turned blue. And in the next example, we're going to show you that doesn't happen. So the next example, we'll do select layer. And this is almost like a temporary alpha lock. So if I take my brush, I can go over just where the letters are again. Everything that has a diagonal stripe is not being selected. So those are the transparent pixels. Now I'm going to go to my layers menu. While select is active, I'm going to do fill layer. Okay, so almost the same. Everything turned to this blue color. Gradient is no longer a gradient, it's actually a solid blue. But if we zoom in, we're going to start to notice that these letters have kind of a glow around them that matches the original color that they were. So this, you can see the outline. For this, it almost looks kind of purplish around the edges in some spots, which just makes it look like the lettering has an outline. If you zoom in on this really close and then compare it to what it looked like in the previous example, in this example there's no outline. Also, this transparency here was not completely filled. You can see that it fades from the blue color out towards that original yellow color, which makes it look kind of green around the edges. Let's go to the next method, which is using color drop. So I'm going to take the color from the top right corner here that I have selected, and I'm just going to drag it over and drop it on one of these letters. Okay, so only the O was filled with this color, and that's because it's the color drop threshold right now is not at 100%, it's at 97.6. If I slide up to the right and it will go to 100%, then everything else will fill. But if I go down just a little bit, it only keeps the O. So you could use this method if you want to recolor only certain letters, as long as they're not touching each other. That would work. But if you want to fill the whole layer, then you have to slide the threshold up to 100%. Let's look what happens on this area. So I'm going to drop it here. You can see that if the threshold is low on an area where it fades to transparent, then it only fills the innermost areas, and it almost comes out as rings until you go all the way up to 100. Even at like 99, you can still see a little bit of yellow around the edges. So just be careful with that. If you have something that is transparent that you want to fill, or slightly transparent, then turn it up to 100. So now let's see what happens if we put the color on part of the gradient. So right now the threshold is really low, but as I continue to slide up, the color starts to fill. And it's filling with areas that are connected to the color. So I started on that golden yellow color, and then as I increase, it's adding in that orange and then the pink next to it. Now if I got all the way up to 100%, so right now we're at 96%, 97%, it's filling the entire word besides the G and the dot of the I, and that's because those are not connected. to the rest of the letters. Now if I go all the way up to 100, then it fills everything else. Okay, so now I'm going to leave it at this, and I have my blue color selected that I used to fill this. I'm just going to color it next to this D. I'm not sure if you can really see a huge difference on the screen, but the color that I have selected that I used for recoloring is not exactly the same as what the D ended up being after I recolored the image. Now that could be because the area that I selected to refill, so remember I filled the D and turned the threshold to 100%, maybe that golden yellow color wasn't the exact same hue as what the solid was. So just be careful if you are trying to get a very specific color, like this specific blue color that we're using, then this might not be the right method. But it does keep the gradient, unlike the two methods we've done before. It does keep the variation in color. So everything here turned to more of a blue tone because that's the color we were changing it to. Okay, the next method is recolor, and this method is pretty similar to color drop. So we'll go to the wand, and then all the way at the bottom it says recolor. So this is kind of confusing. The background is all blue, and that's because our selecting crosshairs are on the background. If I move it around, if I move it to the word solid, then it changes everything, and it ends up looking pretty similar to what's above it. Now if you put this crosshair on this pink color, then it changes everything that's pink. So right now the R and then the N will change to the blue that we have selected, and everything else will adjust by recoloring in accordance with what you originally selected. So selecting different areas will cause different colors to come up. So if we wanted the word solid to for sure be this blue color, we would want to choose that, and it will adjust everything else. Okay, and then in both of these methods, again, we keep the gradient, whereas in the first two, they become solid. So the last one is adjusting HSB, and HSB stands for hue, saturation, and brightness, which can be found right here under adjustments. When you tap on that, then this menu at the bottom comes up, and you can change HSB individually. So changing the hue changes the colors. So I'm going to bring it up to blue. Saturation, if you bring it all the way down, it becomes grayscale, and then higher up, the colors become more vibrant. And then brightness, all the way down is black, all the way up is close to white. So we'll just find somewhere in between. Okay, so you can see that the gradient stayed here. There's still a variation in color in that word. All of the transparency was filled to match the color, and that's because we adjusted the hue. So that's also why in this word gradient, the colors are different than in this word, because here we were, in recolor and color drop, we were actually recoloring towards the blue color, and in HSB we were sliding and just moving the hues of every color up and down. So when we changed the yellow to the blue color, then whatever was pink is now this green color. So those are the 5 methods for recoloring in Procreate. And by the way, you can also use clipping masks to recolor if you're familiar with clipping masks. Basically, you would add a layer, fill it with the color, and then apply the clipping mask to the layer below it. And you can actually use these methods to recolor your clipping masks as well. So I hope you thought this video was helpful. Let us know if you learned something new, and have fun recoloring your lettering in Procreate.